On the very same Saturday, at the very same moment, two completely different countries existed inside the borders of one. In the Scottish Highlands, temperatures were struggling to reach double figures, wintry showers were sweeping across the hills, and sleet and snow were settling on higher ground during the second week of May. At the exact same time, just a few hundred miles to the south, people in southern England were sitting in beer gardens and t-shirts, soaking up 22 degrees Celsius of warm May sunshine with absolutely no idea that a different season was happening at the other end of their own country. That is not a comparison between two different nations with two different climates. That is the United Kingdom. On the same weekend, and the Met Office said it plainly in their official blog on May the 6th, 2026, your wardrobe will be kept busy. That single sentence is perhaps the most British weather summary ever written, and it captures perfectly the extraordinary and almost unbelievable weather split that the country just lived through. To understand how one country can simultaneously experience wintry showers with snow and 22-degree sunshine within the space of a single weekend, you need to understand the atmospheric battle that was playing out directly above Britain during those 2 days. The setup came down to two competing air masses, sitting on completely opposite sides of a sharp meteorological boundary that ran somewhere across northern England, and the contrast between those two air masses was not subtle. It was stark, dramatic, and in meteorological terms, genuinely unusual for the second weekend of May. To the south of that boundary, a warm and relatively humid air mass was still clinging on from the exceptional warmth that had defined the opening days of May 2026. Just 1 week earlier, on Friday the 1st of May, parts of southern England had reached 27 degrees Celsius, which was warmer than Honolulu, Hawaii, on that same day, driven by a powerful southerly flow that had dragged warm continental air all the way northward from Spain and France. That warmth did not vanish overnight. It retreated only gradually, leaving the south of England with a weather weekend that still felt recognizably and genuinely like spring. To the north, however, a completely different story was unfolding in real time. Colder air was sinking southwards from the Arctic, pushing into Scotland and Northern Ireland with a force that made early May feel nothing like what the calendar said it should be. That boundary between the warm air and the cold air is what created the split, and the split was as sharp and as dramatic as any the Met Office team could recall for this time of year. It was not a gentle gradient from warmer to cooler as you traveled north. It was a hard line in the atmosphere, and on one side of it were beer gardens and t-shirts, and on the other were fleeces and wintry showers over the hills. In southern England, and particularly across eastern areas and East Anglia, Saturday the 9th of May delivered warmth that most people would not associate with British spring weather in any normal year. Temperatures reached 20 to 22 degrees Celsius across the south, with good spells of sunshine that made outdoor plans feel entirely sensible and genuinely enjoyable. Breezier conditions near the southern coasts took a slight edge off the warmth for those closest to the English Channel, but across the wider south and southeast, the conditions were, by any measure, markedly pleasant. For the millions of people who had made plans based on the forecast, Saturday delivered exactly what was promised. A warm, bright afternoon with the kind of light and air quality that reminds people in Britain why May, when it cooperates, is one of the finest months in the calendar. Across the Midlands and Wales, conditions were more mixed but still acceptable by British standards, with temperatures generally sitting in the mid to upper teens, some cloud drifting through, but enough sunshine in intervals to make outdoor time worthwhile. The further north you moved, however, the more sharply the picture changed. Across northern England, the boundary between the warm southern air and the cold northern air was making itself felt in the most direct possible way. Temperatures were noticeably lower, the breeze was picking up from the north, and the sense of warmth that existed so clearly in Surrey and Suffolk simply did not reach beyond the Pennines with any real conviction. And then there was Scotland. The Met Office was explicit in its forecast that cold air would continue sinking southwards across Scotland throughout the weekend, and that although some areas, particularly across the northwest, would still see sunshine at times, scattered showers were expected to develop and move through at regular intervals across the country. Over the hills, the forecasters were very specific about what those showers would contain. Some of them, they confirmed, could turn wintry, with sleet and snow possible at times over higher ground. That forecast proved entirely and precisely accurate. Wintry showers pushed across the Scottish Highlands on Saturday, coating higher ground with snow that would have looked entirely at home in November, let alone the second weekend of May. Some parts of the Scottish Highlands had already recorded their coldest May night in several years in the days surrounding this weekend, a statistic that sits in almost surreal contrast with the beer garden temperatures being enjoyed 400 miles to the south at exactly the same time. With brisk winds sweeping in from the north and temperatures struggling to reach anywhere between 8 and 13 degrees Celsius across northern Scotland, with some of the northernmost areas barely getting into double figures at any point during the day, the Scottish experience of Saturday the 9th of May 2026 had far more in common with a cold, raw autumn afternoon than with any version of spring that the second week of May is supposed to represent. Families and communities who had been hoping the brief warmth of early May would extend and develop into something more sustained were instead looking at gray skies, chill winds, and wintry hill showers that served as an abrupt reminder that the Scottish climate operates entirely on its own terms. Northern Ireland sat somewhere between the two extremes, with a somewhat better chance of staying dry and catching occasional sunny spells compared to Scotland, but still running markedly cooler than the warm south and offering absolutely nothing that resembled the t-shirt and sunshine conditions of East Anglia. For residents of Belfast, looking across at weather reports from Brighton, it might as well have been a different country. Sunday the 10th of May brought the inevitable adjustment. The cool air that had been confined to Scotland and the far north on Saturday did not stay contained. It began pressing southward overnight, and by Sunday morning a cold front was already working its way across Britain, pushing the warmer air back toward the south, and replacing it with the fresher, cooler conditions that had dominated the northern half of the country all weekend. The morning started with outbreaks of rain affecting parts of Wales and the Midlands, which gradually shifted southeastward through the day. For some areas in the southeast, including parts of East Anglia, that rain lingered into the afternoon before eventually easing. Behind the front, clearer skies followed, helped by a weak ridge of high pressure extending across the northern parts of the UK, and many areas from northern England through Northern Ireland, the Midlands, and North Wales actually saw some decent sunshine develop during the day once the front had cleared through. Across England and Wales as a whole, temperatures on Sunday generally sat around 13 to 16 degrees, still perfectly pleasant in any sunshine, but a sharp and immediate reminder of just how different Saturday afternoon had felt. Scotland on Sunday saw further rain moving in from the north, reinforcing the colder air once again, with temperatures in some northern areas struggling to get much above 6 to 10 degrees Celsius. It was a Sunday that wrapped the whole extraordinary weekend up in the most British way imaginable, pleasant enough to be outside if you were lucky with your timing, but with enough cloud, rain, and regional variation to ensure that very few people across the country experienced it the same way. What makes this particular weekend so striking is not just the numbers, as dramatic as they are, but the sheer geographical distance involved. The gap between 22 degrees Celsius and wintry showers on the same Saturday in Britain was measured in hundreds of miles, not thousands. You did not need to cross a mountain range, an ocean, or a national border to travel from one end of this weather split to the other. You needed to drive from London to Glasgow, a journey of roughly 400 miles along the M6, and the two ends of that journey belonged to completely different seasons. A person stepping off the train at Euston and a person stepping off the train at Glasgow Central on the afternoon of Saturday the 9th of May were not experiencing the same country in any meaningful meteorological sense. One of them was in late spring, the other was in early autumn, and they were both exactly where their passports said they were. That is one of the things that makes British weather genuinely unlike almost any other country's weather experience in the world. The United Kingdom sits at the precise meteorological crossroads of Arctic air flowing southward from the polar regions, Atlantic storm systems arriving from the west, warm continental air pressing northward from Spain and France, and the cold, dry air masses that can occasionally sweep in from the east. The jet stream, that fast-moving river of wind at high altitude that acts as the main traffic controller for all of these competing air masses, determines which of those influences reaches Britain at any given moment. When the jet stream positions itself in a way that allows warm air to hold over the south while cold air pours into the north, the result is exactly the kind of weather split that the country experienced this weekend. And the speed with which that boundary can shift, as Sunday demonstrated when the cooler air made its move southward in the space of a single morning, is what makes British weather forecasting one of the most technically demanding disciplines in the world. The Met Office's broader outlook for the rest of May 2026 reinforced just how unsettled the pattern remains and how little this weekend's weather split should be treated as a one-off curiosity rather than a sign of what is ahead. The official Met Office forecast stated that changeable and at times rather unsettled conditions look to dominate through the middle part of May, with low pressure often close by and periods of rain or showers expected across many areas, some of which could be heavy. Temperatures across most of the UK were forecast to remain close to or perhaps a little below normal for the time of year, with winds frequently blowing from a northwesterly direction that keeps the colder feel established this weekend as a recurring theme rather than a brief interruption. By the end of May, some models suggest pressure may increase toward the southwest of the UK, which could eventually bring more in the way of dry and settled weather. But the Met Office was careful to avoid presenting that as a reliable conclusion at this stage. The pattern through the middle weeks of May is one where low pressure and northwesterly winds dominate, and that is not a backdrop that produces straightforward, consistent warmth. It is a backdrop that produces exactly the kind of sharp contrasts and rapid transitions that defined the weekend of the 9th and 10th. The wardrobe warning that the Met Office issued on May 6th remains entirely valid for the foreseeable future. But there is also a much longer and more significant context sitting behind this weekend's dramatic weather story, and it deserves to be understood clearly rather than lost in the immediate noise of the forecast details. Britain has just come through a period in which early May produced a day warmer than Hawaii, in which London's April 2026 was the 5th warmest, 4th driest, and 5th sunniest April in the entire historical record, and in which climate scientists at the Met Office have confirmed that the developing El Niño event now active in the Pacific Ocean is expected to push summer 2026 temperatures above the 1991 to 2020 seasonal average by up to 1.5 degrees across Europe. The extraordinary regional split of this weekend, wintry showers and snow in the Scottish Highlands, coexisting with 22 degrees of sunshine in East Anglia on the exact same afternoon, is not just an entertaining and shareable weather story. It is a reflection of a climate system under increasing atmospheric stress, where the contrasts between competing air masses are sharpening, where the speed and severity of transitions between one extreme and another are accelerating, and where what the calendar says the weather should be doing has a progressively weaker connection to what the weather actually does. The United Kingdom sits at the front line of that transition. The forecast in Inverness and the forecast in Ipswich can look like they were written for different months, and on the weekend of May the 9th and 10th, 2026, they effectively were. If that is where Britain is in early May, with a super El Niño still building and a summer of above-average temperatures forecast, then the weather that follows through June, July, and August has every reason to be watched very closely indeed.